This hangout is on air live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Audible Live Thursday night. Make us part of your two-screen experience. I'm Cecil Lammey. There's Sigmund Bloom, Matt Waldman, and Dr. Jene Bramel. And we've got a scorcher going on Thursday night football with the Saints and the Falcons. Bloom, before we jump into the injuries, let's talk about a game update and a very important running back that was concussed.
Yeah, and Alvin Kamara, and this is why, if you want to make an argument, like fantasy football is stupid or something, Alvin Kamara, a lot of playoff teams, hopefully for those teams, buys. A lot of those teams might be slowed down tonight, and they're push for a championship as he got a concussion, I think, on the first drive of the game, or maybe the second drive of the game. My point is that, and you could see too. It was a beautiful game if you hadn't watched the Saints closely to see the way they move Kamara around the formation, get him in space. In a way, they make it look so easy, right? I mean, this is exactly what we talk about all the time. Like, oh, they should just get this guy in space and get the ball to him. And they make it look so easy. And you see how they're just taking yards. Almost the way that Wes Welker was getting open and making 8-10 yard gains look like 2 yard gains in the running game. So he goes out. Brees still distributing the ball well. And, we did see a nice pass to Tommy Lee Lewis to score. Michael Thomas hoovering up everything thrown in his vicinity. He's obviously going to play a larger role. And, in general, I think what we're seeing is without Kamara, this offense is maybe going back to a Drew Brees-centric offense, although both of these teams are playing it pretty close to the vest. As I had hoped after watching Devontae Freeman last week, they're going to more Devontae Freeman. He does have the touchdown, and his yards per carry doesn't show it, but I think he's running really well. And we also saw Julio Jones get free. And Marshawn Lattimore, if you haven't got a chance to watch him up close and personal, you're seeing how tenacious he is. But Julio still got one catch and run. And Matt Ryan's playing okay, but you can still feel that this is an underachieving Atlanta offense and a team that can't underachieve in the second half here, or this is going to be a real uphill battle to get into the playoffs.
Horrible clock management before the halftime festivities, Matt. And it's something we're waiting to see, like, okay, will they go to more Jonathan Williams or Trey Edmonds or whoever with Kamara? No, as Bloom said, Matt, it's just looking like more of Brees.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of that too is that the Saints and the Falcons both prepared for their opposing running games, and they're playing a lot of man coverage. So you're seeing a preponderance of slants and crossing routes in this game, which are, the man beater type of routes that you're going to run when the team basically says, we're going to stop the run and play one-on-one on the outside. And that's what's happened. And it's really a focus of saying, okay, can Marshawn Lattimore hang out, hold off Julio Jones? And can Desmond Trufant hold off Michael Thomas? Well, we saw Trufant stop Thomas on a third down at the 1 on a slant. And we saw Lattimore at the end of the half basically out physical Julio Jones, if you want to call it a hold or whatever it was. He was pretty physical with them and with each other on a second read that Ryan went to, but didn't really look close enough to see the position, and ended up, nearly giving away the lead on that play. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're going to probably see both teams have to open it up a little bit more because of the way that the teams are going here, with the way that they're, defending them with this one-on-one coverage. And it's just a matter of which team can be more creative. And if we're going to make a bet on this one, I think we all believe in Sean Payton being the more creative of the two, and Drew Brees being, in all honesty, the better quarterback. And, I think Matt Ryan put it very well to the broadcast team in this game, which was this game's probably going to come down to the offense with the last series. And I think that that's very true. And Atlanta better hope that they think the offense with the last series means that if the Saints get the ball last, there better be less than 5 seconds left on the clock.
It is the first week of the fantasy playoffs, and every single decision, no pressure, but every single decision that you make is hyper critical. So Dr. Jene Bramel, we kick things off with an injury report where Zach Ertz had a limited practice today. Are you feeling good about his status for week 14?
Oh, the Eagles official Twitter account seems to be feeling good about it, tweeting that he passed concussion protocol, which really isn't the case with a limited practice, and I think they walked it back after that. But yes, I think when you see a DNP doing some football-related activity and then being cleared to do a little bit more in practice, there's no guarantee that he won't have recurrent symptoms overnight tonight, and we see a little bit of a downgrade on Friday, but that doesn't seem to be the case. They're clearly preparing him to play. They don't need to modify the game plan much one way or the other. If we see a full practice or even a consecutive limited practice, it's a pretty good sign for him tomorrow. And I think we're getting into the probable range for sure right now with him.
Okay, Gene. Tim Twentyman tweeted out that Matthew Stafford did a lot more in practice today. He's even spinning the ball. I think that he's handing the ball off. And should that mean that we should feel okay about his hand, or is there anything that we need to change in our approach to the Lions this week based on his bruised throwing hand?
I feel better about it today, Thursday night, than I did yesterday. Yesterday, there was some indication from some of the beat writers and Jim Caldwell himself, which really, he never really, Detroit in general, but Caldwell in particular, never gives any information, any details about the injury. And he said yesterday that there was a little bit of a way to go. They had some concern. Stafford himself said he didn't feel great yet. But, you know, we said this frequently over the past couple of years. Stafford plays through anything. So you're right. The question isn't, is he going to play? Because the answer to that is yes. The question will be, how effective can he be? And what we heard today is a really good sign because he's still got another 72 hours of recovery time. And he has played through injuries to his throwing hand before, his middle finger in particular. So if his grip strength is there, the swelling isn't going to make much difference. It really has to do with grip strength and whether or not there's any soreness there. Then he could be limited a little bit, but I think we're going to have a pretty good indication tomorrow. Wouldn't shock me if he returned to a full practice and was able to do a little bit more. So I think Stafford's probably going to be okay. It's really hard to bet against him with any injuries because he's going to play through them.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're looking at a lot of players in the news in terms of how it impacts our fantasy team, but I think that we all would like to, send well wishes to Ryan Shazier and
No
what
doubt.
happened the other night. So, can you discuss for those who are listening who may have not caught up on the latest with Shazier, what's happening and the details of all of that?
Yeah, I don't think we know. There's really not been a lot of specifics because I don't think the team wants to. I don't think they want to say anything that may prove later to be, and it's a difficult injury to talk about. And I don't think they necessarily want to give out any false hope either. I think, and it may be that Shazier has asked for this as well, but they're being close with the details. And what happened today, or at some point in the last 24 hours, is that he had a spinal stabilization surgery by which they're fusing a couple of bones together. And that almost certainly means the term that was used today was from somebody, I don't know what it was I forgot what it was, dislocated, which really isn't necessarily the case. I think if there was a dislocation in that spinal canal, that probably would not be dealing with a situation where he would be making progress from a neurologic standpoint, where he'd be able to regain some feeling in his extremities. Those type of broken bones that to the area that are protecting the cord itself, oftentimes you get fragments that go where you don't want them to go. The cord gets stretched in such a way that it's bruised or it's injured even more than that. And there's been some indication early on, Monday night into Tuesday, that he had regained some feeling, which is a really positive sign, but it doesn't necessarily portend a full recovery yet. So they wanted to stabilize the area now that they didn't have to. The way they described it, the other thing that sometimes happens, and it didn't have to happen immediately, is sometimes they actually have to go in there and open up that canal to make some room for swelling so that there's not so much pressure on the cord that some of the nerves do well. So again, I was just sort of talking through some of the possibilities here, but I don't think what happened today is necessarily a terrible situation for him. It doesn't mean that they're walking back that he had some improvement. I think it's a situation where they're stabilizing him so they can begin some rehab and start the process of observing and hoping that he continues to have recovery. Now, whether he's going to play football again, who knows at this point. But there's been more positive signs, I think, over the last 72 hours than what we were originally, worried about in the first hours after the injury itself.
I don't want to sound the alarm, but Tom Brady's missed 2 practices in a row for the first time all season. It's an Achilles, which is always a little unnerving, and it's the Patriots, so who in the hell knows? But Dr. Gene, it's Monday night, so maybe we'll take some solace in that. Where do you come down on this Brady Achilles thing?
I think he's all right, and I'm blanking here. Richard Sherman is the first who's the other player in the last couple of weeks that's been on the injury report with an Achilles? You guys remember? I don't know where my brain is. But there have been 2 players this year who have had ongoing Achilles, Jimmy Smith, ongoing Achilles symptoms who have gone on to rupture their Achilles tendon. And I think that's the question that I get a lot is he at high risk here from trying to play through this injury?
Richard Sherman, too.
Yeah, so Sherman was the first and Jimmy Smith was the second. And just trying to know, there's no really way to know. He's at higher risk, probably not at a high risk of a catastrophic injury, but it's there. So I think it's something we have to be mindful of. But I think maybe we talked about this on one of the Sunday morning shows a couple of weeks ago, is that, it's not quite as limiting as it might be for another position, but it's really important for a quarterback to be able to drop back in the pocket, even from a shotgun position, bounce, hitch up in the pocket, and then be able to move comfortably. And Tom Brady, if you watch him, more so than almost any other quarterback, is constantly on his toes and hitching and bobbing around, and he's putting some pressure on that. So it's not necessarily an accuracy issue, but it's just sort of a timing and flow situation. He didn't look limited last week, didn't look limited the week before. So I don't think it's a huge issue, but it's definitely something that they're mindful of and making sure that he's getting treatment so that he is as ready as he can be to play on Sunday. I don't see any maybe week 17. If they've got a bye wrapped up, maybe we'll see them be a little bit more cautious with Brady than they would have been otherwise, but I don't think it's going to be an issue for 14, 15, 16.
Okay, Gene. We've got some differing information here, right? Rich Chimney from ESPN says, potential bad news for the Jets. Robbie Anderson, their best offensive threat, failed to complete practice today after aggravating hamstring injury. He was listed with a hamstring, but practiced fully. Asked when the setback occurred, Todd Bowles said probably today. He said, I hope it's not serious, but was non-committal about a status for Sunday. Meanwhile, right around the same time, Ian Rappaport tweets out, Jets wide receiver Robbie Anderson, who did not finish practice today because of his hamstring, should be okay, source said. So what should we be looking for tomorrow? And this is an afternoon game. Give us some guidance here, Obi-Wan.
Something doesn't add up. You're exactly correct. The other part of this is multiple source that when I was preparing the article tonight, said that the injury happened today in practice. But he's on the injury report Wednesday with a hamstring thing. So maybe it was tightness in the other leg or something like that. But it's just a little bit interesting as how it come up. Anderson has been on the injury report as a full practice pretty much for 2 months now, with knee, with hamstring, with other things. He fully practices and he plays and looks fine doing so. There's some concern today because they pulled him out of practice, which they really haven't been doing. So I think we're going to get a sense tomorrow whether or not, if he's limited, then I think we might hear a little bit of a game time decision, and then you'd lean toward him playing. If he's not doing anything in practice tomorrow, it's going to be a real concern. But I think there's a chance that we'll see him fully practice and be just fine. So Friday's going to be key, like it always is. There's a number of situations like that this week where really not sure what the Thursday participation report meant for that particular player, and Anderson is close to the top of the list.
Let's go to Jimmy Graham and that intriguing Seattle-Jacksonville game that's going to be on the slate Sunday. Obviously the Jaguars have a very strong defense in terms of linebackers and their ability to cover, but Jimmy Graham certainly can be a difference maker when he's healthy. Is he going to be healthy enough to go, even though you have him expected to play as of Wednesday?
Yeah, I think he's fine. Didn't practice again on Thursday, but there's not much concern. He's really not done much until Friday. That the practice line has been DNP full for Graham for about 3 weeks now, and he's looked pretty comfortable on the field. What is Matt Ryan doing in this half? So I don't think there's going to be any concern that he'll be able to go. He really hasn't been limited. I think he may have come off the field briefly last week and then was back in and looking okay. So I'd expect him to be fine unless there's something unexpected on Friday's practice report.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night, most Thursday nights, right here on youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Almost have 5,000 subscribers. So thank you all for clicking that little subscription box and the little bell to get the notice that we are live. And how are you feeling about Tyrod Taylor this week with no team drills today, but trying to get back out there, Dr. Gene?
Yeah, yesterday I think I don't remember what I wrote yesterday. I'm getting old, but I'm pretty sure that I wrote yesterday that I didn't expect him to play, that, he was a DNP. They weren't really very optimistic about him. And, those kind of patellar contusions take a little bit longer to get better. And there's lots of reasons with all the players they're putting on injured reserve. I think they still want to get a look at Nathan Peterman, even though that was the debacle that it was in that first half when they tried that the first time. But then he's back on the practice field today doing some individual stuff and moving around a little bit. And I don't think they do that with him unless they'd be willing to put him out there in some form or fashion. So if he responds to today's practice on Thursday and doesn't have as much pain or is still doing a little bit better on Friday, I think we'll see him do some more. And then the Bills are going to have a decision to make. So I think he's much more likely to play now than I did yesterday. But Friday and what he's able to do and how he feels overnight is going to tell the tale.
Gene, we've been in a holding pattern with Chris Hogan, and then all of a sudden he's practicing, and it's a Monday night game. Now, another thing skewing the optics of what to do with Hogan is Rob Gronkowski being suspended, which makes us want to err on the side of playing Hogan. What can we add to that medically? If we see full practices, is it a go? Should we treat
He's
him
not
the way?
going to fully practice. It's pretty rare for the Patriots to do that anyway, so I wouldn't expect that. That doesn't need to be our trigger there. In other words, if he does not have a full practice by tomorrow or Saturday morning, which is going to be a walkthrough and not much anyway, if he doesn't get back to a full practice this week, that doesn't mean that he can't come back and get a decent complement of snaps. And when he was interviewed in the locker room today, which is generally another pretty good sign for the Patriots players, he stopped short of saying that he was anything more than just day-to-day and that he was absolutely going to play. But he talked about getting back into the swing of things, getting involved in the game plan and all of those things. And with a shoulder injury, there's probably not a lot of reconditioning that needs to happen. He needs to kind of get back into the ability to take hits and stuff. But they cleared him to practice in pads today, although it was just individual drills. And he wasn't in a no-contact jersey or anything like that. So I think they are preparing him to play. And I think it's unlike some other players where you may only expect him to get 50-60% of the snaps in the first week back after they've missed a fair amount of time. As you said, with Gronk out and with some of the other issues with the offense there, with the offensive line and otherwise, it makes sense for them to want to have somebody else that they can use shorter in between the numbers and play some of those other roles. So as of now, I've got him marked as likely to play today after the first official practice report, and I'm expecting him to go. And I think Hogan really wanted to tell reporters that today, but just didn't quite feel comfortable and fully confident in doing so. He probably is going to get the stink eye from Belichick if he did such a thing. So I think he's going to play. And I don't think he's going to take every snap, but I as of now, it wouldn't shock me if he was healthy enough to get 5 to 8 targets.
Well, as I watched this week with injuries, with Kamara's concussion, Stafford's wrists, and I'm sitting here thinking I'm happy this team that has these guys is on a bye, and I'm lucky for that. But Delaney Walker is another guy that's on my squad that is dealing with an ankle injury, and it seems like it's an aggravated situation. How do you feel about his availability this week and beyond?
So it's a high ankle sprain, but it wasn't a very violent mechanism. But it's, as we always say, those injuries, you're looking at 48 hours after the injury to decide whether or not there's a problem. We're dealing with Tennessee that has no difficulty holding players out of practice the entire week and then allowing them to play. Mike Mularkey told reporters on Thursday that he expected Walker to do something in practice tomorrow. Now, I don't think we can take that to mean that he's definitely going to play this week. I think that means they're going to see how his ankle responds to a little bit of practice. They're going to continue to get him some treatment, and then we'll reevaluate him on Saturday. But we've seen veteran after veteran, and Walker included, play through some pretty painful injuries. He only missed a brief period of time with the knee problem that he had, and then looks like he's going to try to play through this high ankle sprain. I think he's going to be limited this week, but I would lean right now towards him playing. We'll see how practice tomorrow goes.
Gina in the chat room, who is one of our regular viewers and listeners. Gina, we appreciate you very much. She says, what about Robert Woods?
Yeah, he has not practiced, did not practice again on Thursday. We're probably, the initial timetable there was 2 to 3 weeks at minimum, and that's where we are now. Not going to play this week. The hope, I think, would be that he gets back in some practice, and we see his practice participation next week look like what Chris Hogan is going through this week.
Gene, let's talk about 2 injury situations that are affecting the outlook of one player. One, Rashard Matthews does look like he's going to be back. The other, Patrick Peterson, missing practice today, and that is what would give you pause about playing Rashard Matthews. So talk about these two and how they fit together and what we know.
I felt forced to put still awaiting information on both Patrick Peterson and Jalen Ramsey today, but I think that both of them are going to play. Neither one of them are practicing. Peterson was a little bit of a downgrade. They both have soft tissue injuries that you would worry for a cornerback and a physical cornerback like the two of them. So I'm anxious to see what they look like on Friday. Matthews, yesterday, Mike Mularkey, I think, wanted to say that he was going to play, was pretty impressed with how he looked on the field. The beat writers really liked how Matthews was getting in and out of routes, and then fully practiced today. So assuming there's nothing unusual tomorrow, we just talked about Murray and Walker and Mariota and a few other players that don't practice. Rashard Matthews goes full Thursday, Friday, and he's going to go without limitation. That looks like the way it's probably going to go.
Well, let's see. Looking down this list of guys, let's talk a little bit about, I don't know, LaShawn McCoy and his knee. How are we feeling about him for those fantasy owners who have kind of worked through McCoy and his age and injuries, and he still seems to be chugging along just fine?
I think we're going to be good. We talked last Sunday morning that he's hobbled off and on the field a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and I don't know if it's been the knee every time. Clearly it was once. He kind of banged that knee directly down onto the turf and limped off and then came back. Travaris Cadet is dealing with concussion. He kind of surprisingly was back to a little bit more practice today than I thought he would be. Mike Tolbert was back to a full practice, so they're going to have some other options. They're going to be healthier on the depth chart there than they've been. Both Buffalo will in some time. But there's no indication that there's something going on with McCoy enough where he's not going to be able to get his usual 20 touches. Maybe they rest him a little bit tomorrow, but the two full practices this week are a really reassuring sign.
The Audible Live Thursday nights right here on youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. And I believe it was Tom Kiefer that said you only go once around the ride. So one more time around the circle, fellas, for Dr. Jene Bramel and Mr. Mike YouTube. A couple of things, Gene. I think he wants you to do like a Batman impression, like I'm Batman. Where is she? Just ruined my voice there. And then he also wants to know if Richard Sherman's going to play.
Yeah, I don't think Richard Sherman's going to play. My TV where I'm watching the game is right up here above me. So when you see me looking up over the side, I'm paying attention to whatever's going on. And
it's not actually strobe lights. Dr. Gene is not actually a DJ. They're not having a rave in his home.
It's Bob Henry, I think.
No, but if Dr. Gene was a DJ, I would imagine if I saw a picture of that guy that he was a DJ, I'd say he must be one of the best DJs in the world. So spin us a tune here about Amari Cooper, and not just for this week, because the question isn't. I don't think he's going to play this week. I think
he's not.
That appears to be clear. But does this now extend into the range like next week against Dallas? I mean, is this now in that range where we want to see him for a week before we trust him? In the playoffs, we don't have that luxury, and he's been so up and down this year. If it was Kansas City this week, that's the game that he had 200 yards and so on. So what kind of guidance looking ahead to next week? Obviously, we would get more information if he does return leading up to that. But are we erring on the side of being cautious with him, or is it?
Because we're dealing with a multiple week high ankle sprain at this point. So he's not. Last week, you weren't hoping, but there was a chance that the primary reason he was missing practice was because he was still working through the concussion protocol. But he was cleared. He's been cleared for contact according to what Oakland has said, and he's listed on the injury report this week only with the ankle concern. And he's not been able to practice through Thursday. You would expect that he's not likely to go tomorrow. Maybe he does a limited practice just kind of in anticipation of doing a little bit more for next week. But you're looking at week 15 at the best, and when you've got a multiple week high ankle sprain, it's hard to see him go from 2 weeks of not practicing to being ready for full contact and a full complement of snaps next week. So you're hoping at best that you're getting 50 to 60 somewhat comfortable snaps in week 16, and that just feels unlikely at this point. I don't think we're on the verge of injured reserve like Jordan Reed and what we got with Jordan Matthews and a few others this week. But I would not expect much from Amari Cooper for the rest of the year.
So what about Doug Martin? Any hope for Peyton Barber owners, or is Doug Martin going to be back in action? Thankful for those who rooting for Doug Martin. But
I think that's a question for you guys. I wonder if Peyton Barber has done enough, given how Doug Martin looked before suffering the concussion, that Barber is going to have a sizable role anyway. Martin is back-to-back fully practice. I would anticipate him being cleared to play this week. What the touch distribution is going to have more to do with what the coaching staff feels about Martin's production before he was injured, and how Barber has looked over the last month and a half as he's gotten a little bit more role in the offense.
He is Dr. Jene Bramel. You check out his work at footballguys.com. You follow him on Twitter at Jene Bramel, and you watch him right here on this show. Now go spin some records, Dr. Jene, and we appreciate your time, as always.
2 turntables and a microphone.
Yeah.
And there we have it. Dr. Jene Bramel, ladies and gentlemen, and he uses vinyl. He doesn't scratch with 2 iPods. Yeah, I got a couple of DJ friends. They play to parties of like 5 people. Anyway, Bloom, let's get a game update.
Well, Dr. Jene, I just want to point out that Dr. Jene. That's why it's not a G. See? So it's DJ Bramel. Matt Ryan is, I mean, and I almost want to hand the mic here to Matt Waldman, who's watched every game of Matt Ryan closely. Although, as he's pointed out, that Matt Ryan is not the best at handling pressure. I don't even think it's pressure. I mean, if it's pressure that Matt Ryan is putting on himself in his own head. And go ahead. No, go ahead. Take it.
I mean, I'd agree with that. And I think that what you're seeing here is that, at the end of the half, you see Ryan go from his first read to his second read, and he didn't regard the coverage that was there by Marshawn Lattimore and throws the ball, right into Marshawn Lattimore's hands that nearly ends in a field goal that was basically nullified because of a penalty that the Saints committed in time, and the time runoff basically ended the half at a tie. But then Ryan comes right out there and has some bad luck because he throws the ball to Austin Hooper, who lets the ball bounce off his chest. And
how many times has that happened this year, by the way?
A good bit. Hooper's dropped the ball,
I mean, he's responsible for one of their losses.
Yeah, he is. And that was a tougher play, but this was definitely an easy one that just kind of careened off his chest, somehow rolled onto his back, and a receiver catches. But then this particular, the last interception, the third one and the second one in this half, was after a long drive where, Freeman's basically doing most of the heavy lifting. And Ryan on third down once again comes off his first read, says, I'm gonna move away from the pocket and get an open area. And here's Julio Jones in the back left corner of the end zone, but he's being covered by Williams, and Williams is literally in front of him when Ryan throws the ball. Doesn't even throw it high enough for Jones to make a leaping play over it. It's basically like, here, Williams, have the ball, And so when you look at those scenarios, part of it might be that Ryan, and he was trying to force the ball into Jones earlier in the red zone on a play where he tried to sidearm it. So you get the sense that, Ryan's trying to create too much and put, like you said, too much pressure on himself to create plays. It is a tight divisional race, and they're at home trying to, put the dagger in here and have a chance to get a lead in the division and really kind of, make a move here. And it just seems like that he's just overthinking things and not playing football the way that you would expect him to.
Speaking of overthinking things, Matt, I want to get into philosophy with you, and I so adore our road trip every single year to Mobile, Alabama.
Be great again.
It's a 12-hour round trip car ride, and we do it on purpose. Like, we could all fly into Mobile. I've done it. It's not fun, but it's the car ride, it's the talk, it's the philosophy. And this week on the show, Bloom and I have once again talked about the Marcy Rossman rule. And Bloom, I should have known better, because we have so many, millions upon millions of new downloads and more downloads this year. We appreciate everyone for listening to the show. And I did get some what is this Marcy Rossman story? Well, briefly, for those that already know, when I was in high school, I dated a girl from Eaton, Colorado, and I took her to homecoming. And Marcy Rossman, beautiful girl. And I left her at the dance so I could go egg the principal's house and drink beer. And then I came back. She didn't know anybody there. She had her cousin there. That was it. Came back, broke up, blah, blah, blah. So the point is, you dance with who brung you. So, Matt, when Bloom and I are going through this, right, and we're talking about dance with who brung you, Marcy Rossman, all these sorts of things, is that something that, and it's not a, nothing is a block rule, like this is regardless, you start your studs. Nah, but it's just like, even going through what the heck flexes today on the preview show, it's like most of them were like regular starters, but it's just being a little more safe or cautious with this. We did have a question from Joe in the chat room saying like McCaffrey or Burkhead this week in PPR league. So, there are some close calls. It basically comes down, Marcy Rossman rules, start your studs, or don't get too cute with it in the fantasy postseason in the first week. How do you approach that when you're making your decisions?
I agree, and then I think that, as Bloom and I also talked about earlier in the week, was that there are fewer studs than you actually expect, or than what you think, and so part of that is understanding that the Marcy Rossman rule. I mean, if Marcy Rossman were your daughter and the guy who took her out on a date said, "I'm split and go egg the principal's house and have a few beers," and there's actually a nice young man that wants to go out and and have a dance with you, and and is gonna treat you pretty well, then then you probably look at that fool who did that and go, "Hey, maybe that's not the person you dance with, is the one that it's kind of like Kareem Hunt. You look at Kareem Hunt, and he was charming Cecil Lammey at the beginning of the at the beginning of the season. But then, around week 5, week 6, his offensive line buddies were like, "We're injured." They brought a new crew of guys, and they're like, "Come on, Kareem, let's go get some drinks and go egg Andy Reid's house." And they've been doing that for the past 6, 7 weeks. And Kareem Hunt hasn't actually been doing much there. So, in that case, if you're Marcy Rossman, then, maybe someone else looks a little bit more appealing at this point, that, at this stage. And I think that's what you got to look at, is injury, to supporting staff, to supporting cast, like the offensive line for a running back, or an offensive line's ability to pass protect for a quarterback, or an injury to that player himself, and how well he's shown any signs of being able to, recover from that and do some of the things that he did earlier in the season. Those are situations where that you'd say, okay, I'll go back to that person after they've been, there's an extenuating circumstance there. But if nothing's changed and you're just hoping that a good matchup is going to change it, well, it might happen, but that's kind of like being lucky with the wrong process, and I think that what you're trying to do is find a good process with it. And if there's a logical process behind why that player's been struggling and nothing's changed, well, then it's time for you to stop beating your head up against the wall and do something, logical with it and make a change. But otherwise, if it's a 1 or 2 game instance where the matchups were bad, the weather was bad, one player got hurt that was, was a key situation, or it was a game script where, say, for instance, Hunt was doing great for the past 6 to 8 weeks, but he had one really bad game last week because the Chiefs got down early and they went away from the run game. Well, then you would have gone back to him. And there are a number of players that you can explain that type of situation with. So to me, it's about just finding the logic behind it and making sure that you're looking at, matchup and supporting staff and those extenuating circumstances I just described.
Well, Bloom, there's also a peeping Tom mode that you have to have as a fantasy football owner, where your window. Like, are you out of the window? Are you firmly within the window, or is the window closing? And that's where, when you question guys like Jamal Williams, is that now with Aaron Jones and the big overtime touchdown run, like, is now a Jamal Williams window closing? Alex Collins going to work through those migraines. Danny Woodhead, a disappointment last week, but is that a window that is now closing? Can Kareem Hunt get the window back open? So I think that's another thing, Bloom, that we've discussed when looking to fantasy football analysis and going, all right, identify your windows, know your window in football and in life.
Yeah, and I think it was maybe Rich Rebar who used that analogy on the couch, like just trying to catch these windows, get in these windows of production. It's almost like an updraft, and you want to catch that updraft. First of all, I just want to commend Matt Waldman for that rhetorical move that was really right out of the Lyceum, because the Marcy Rossman rule, we are taking Marcy Rossman to the dance, but you turn that around, and now we're Marcy Rossman.
That's right.
And the players are supposed to take us to the dance.
I've never felt so beautiful.
Yeah, the Marcy Rossman rule has like some transitive properties. I really like that. So on that question of windows, I think that absolutely there is an idea of momentum and not going against momentum. And I think every year, and it doesn't like it stops me from doing it, okay, but trying to guess inflection points and the inflection point is the point in the curve where it turns. Either it has hit its peak and starts to downturn, or it's hit its trough and it starts to upturn. And trying to anticipate those inflection points, and I suppose as a fantasy analyst who peddles my advice and analysis as wares, those sometimes are the most memorable calls that people are really impressed by or something. And maybe we may try too hard to find those inflection points because those are the calls when you're the one person out of 50 that are saying, no, this situation is not going to go the direction it's been going. However, to put together this with what Matt said, you have to have a why. But for some of the specific situations you talked about, Jamal Williams. So I'm not guessing that the inflection point is going to be this week. There is one piece, one clue that the Packers, even when Aaron Jones was outplaying Jamal Williams, did seem to want to have some sort of committee. However, and we're assuming rational coaching, and man, assuming rational coaching can get us in trouble here. But assuming rational coaching, Jamal Williams has really played the part of a feature back, getting stronger as the day goes on. And Matt Ryan just almost did it again. Oh man. And I think that so when it comes time to set my lineup, I'm not necessarily assuming 21 carries for Jamal Williams, but I'm assuming 16 or 18. I might not assume 4 receptions. I'm assuming 2 or 3. And against Cleveland, I would assume he would have a scoring opportunity or 2. I'm not expecting that to turn it back into a 50-50 running back by committee. It could. And Rob Domofsky, who earlier in the season said that, Aaron Jones had earned the right to be the man, walked that back today based on how Jamal Williams has been doing. Now that we still might see something like a 50-50 committee, some sort of DeMarco Murray, Derrick Henry thing that frustrates us, but I'm not trying to guess when that's going to happen. I say that, and I'll talk out the other side of my mouth and say,
does it happen when Rodgers comes back? Like, is Aaron Jones a better Rodgers back than Williams? Because Williams is a banger, and we love the guy, right? We talked to him at the Senior Bowl. I talked to him at the Super Bowl. I love the guy. But is Jones a better, quote-unquote, fast break back?
I think if they feel comfortable enough with Rodgers to create his own pass protection with his legs and not worry about the collarbone, then the answer is absolutely, because Jones offers him that big play ability, and they're going to get more matchups with nickel because of what Rodgers can do. But if they're a little more worried about Rodgers and want to make sure that he gets good pass protection, well, then all you have to do is look at Jamal Williams taking out defensive tackles on twists against Tampa Bay last week and know where you stand there.
Yeah, and I do think that the matchup against Minnesota is really interesting. And it'll be incumbent on Green Bay to try to set the tempo of that game. And I think that actually trying to make that an up-tempo game with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs and the way Case Keenum is playing. And let me take a moment to say, I don't want to say Case Keenum's for real. Like, he might turn back into Case Keenum that we'd seen in the past. But Case Keenum is playing some of the best football of any quarterback in the NFL. And like Bob Harris likes to say, divorce the name from the numbers. If we didn't know who that was playing quarterback for Minnesota, and we were just watching them, we'd say, Minnesota has a good quarterback. And I feel comfortable playing Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs every week, knowing that that's the guy throwing the ball to them. So with Green Bay's secondary, I guess you always want to put your hopes on Aaron Rodgers, but we've seen Green Bay and Mike McCarthy before show an inclination to try to win games, 2017 instead of 35-31. And Jamal Williams is a running back that fits into that idea. And I'm very interested with both of them hopefully fully healthy for week 16, all 3 of them, including Aaron Rodgers, what we will see there. But I do think this is one of those situations where if we see Jamal Williams this week get 2/3 or more of the touches, then that's what we should assume going forward. If it's a 50-50 committee, then we're going to know just to stay away from here on out.
Matt, we had a question coming in the chat room. Andrew Cook says, does Jay Ajayi have a window?
Oh man, if he has a window, I think it's still kind of foggy outside, and you don't really know if it's a second story window that you're going to fall out of and land on the ground, or whether it's just out into a nice, soft, cushy spot of grass on the first floor. And I think that's the big concern, because you look at what LeGarrette Blount's been able to do, what Corey Clement's been able to do, the way they rotate these backs in and out. And I just don't see Jay Ajayi being the guy who's going to get you the Jamal Williams carries that we saw from Williams earlier, in recent weeks. So I think that for Ajayi, you're looking at him as a flex play, and I think that's the best that you can do, and that's the best expectation you should have, even if he happens to exceed expectations in a given game due to game script. Because Corey Clement's getting his in the red area, regardless of who's running hot. You just see that in terms of the way they like to play it. So knowing that, you just kind of have to regard this in the same way as you regard the Patriots offense, which is kind of a committee backfield where each guy certainly has his role. And if the one of the top two guys happens to be running reasonably hot and they have a good matchup advantage, they're going to keep going to that. And that tends to be Ajayi, and it has been Blount before that.
The Audible live each and every Thursday night, most Thursday nights, as I've said. Bloom, we did have the question about Burkhead versus McCaffrey, and this kind of fits what we're talking about in PPR leagues because, okay, let's identify studs. Let's identify the best matchup. And I love the Monday Night Punch.
Mm-hmm.
No mistake, no bones about that. I love Monday Night Punch, plus no Gronk, and maybe no Hogan, and could be more Burkhead because of that.
Right. Look, and this is one where I think that in the sense of always start your studs, or this idea I've been saying a lot on spots this week, don't overthink it. What it applies to is look at the last three. It's in windows. It all fits together. Look at the last 3 or 4 weeks. That's your window. Okay. I don't know how you could put Rex Burkhead on the bench right now. I mean, if you have Le'Veon Bell and, well, Alvin Kamara, Todd Gurley or LaShawn McCoy or Leonard Fournette, those are the kind of running backs, and that's it. It's a short list of who I'm playing over Rex Burkhead, and it's like what we had last year with LeGarrette Blount, but in some ways even better because Burkhead can contribute as a receiver. And I mean, one of these weeks we are going to get a Dion Lewis 3-touchdown game. It might be this week. So I still think Lewis is a solid running back too. But Rex Burkhead right now, you can see this. And there was a sequence in the last 2 weeks where Burkhead ran the ball down to the 1 or 2, and then they went back to Burkhead on the next 2 plays. A sequence that we often see go the other way when a player will make it was like a 22-yard run or something like that. So I really think that Burkhead is the dedicated goal line back now, and Lewis will still get some goal-to-go carries and looks in the red zone. However, I don't believe that you can take Rex Burkhead out of lineup. I think that you are potentially taking a 2 or 3 touchdown out. I mean, he's back-to-back 2-touchdown games. What? It's Miami. Don't get fooled in the ceases where you can take the baton. Don't get fooled by what happened last week against Denver. Miami has one of the worst defenses in the NFL, like one of the 3 or 4 worst. There's no way you're taking the dedicated touchdown scorer for the Patriots and putting him on the bench. On the McCaffrey tip, really quick. I don't love McCaffrey this week.
Is it because you're down on Newton this week?
I'm down on the whole Carolina offense. Look, Devin Funchess is going to see a lot of Xavier Rhodes. Greg Olsen and Christian McCaffrey have to deal with a very athletic, smart linebacking core. Okay, they've got good safeties. I don't know that the play calling is going to be creative enough, and they're going to really rise to the challenge. This is a tremendous challenge, and I just don't know that this is the kind of offense that can meet that challenge. So I would expect the whole Panthers offense to underperform this week.
Mookie Harris chimes in the chat room, which is reacting to me. And Maddie says, I got Prescott and Keenum. Which one would you play, Mr. Waldman?
Yeah, that's a great question. And when you take a look at the matchups here, I mean, it's a scenario where you think of Keenum and what he's been doing. It just seems like you would say it's a slam dunk in this stage because he's got the receiving core. He's in a situation where you've got to feel good about his ability to basically work behind a strong offensive line. And, when you look at it from that scenario, that's probably the best potential, for upside in a game. But then again, Prescott's got that great matchup against the New York Giants. The problem being is that, when we look at what Prescott has done, he's thrown for over 200 yards once in the past 6 weeks, and while it's been Washington, Atlanta, Philadelphia, and they've had some injuries to their offensive line, the Giants are a game-ready script to run the ball against. And so I just don't see the upside for Prescott when basically the Cowboys can use Alfred Morris and Rod Smith to run the Giants out of the stadium. And I think that that's more likely of a scenario, even with Eli Manning's vaunted return from his one-game layoff. So I think that you're safer with a more tightly contested game, a game where you have a tougher run defense with the Panthers, and you have a chance for, Keenum to really excel there.
Nate has a great question, Bloom, and it's something we discussed on the preview show, but let's do it on the live show as well. And he would like us to rank the replacements for Gronk in Anderson, Brait, and Rudolph.
Rudolph's the call here. I mean, Rudolph, I think, has established himself as a top 5 tight end with the injuries and things that are going on. Or when I talk on the show sometimes about that group of tight ends that you play every week, he's in that group. Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, Zach Ertz, Delaney Walker, Jimmy Graham, and Zach Rudolph. Kyle Rudolph. He's in, and Evan Ingram, I think, has earned his way back into that group now. And that's the cutoff of the guys that you play every week, regardless of matchup, regardless of trends. And then I think the second would be Anderson. And Anderson is my number 7 tight end this week. And I'm rolling with him in at least 2 of my playoff lineups. I'm rolling with him in all my lineups where I have him. And I don't have somebody ahead of him. Because you have a lot of different ways that Anderson can get production this week. He's not a typical tight end. He's a move tight end. He was playing wide receiver last week. You saw chemistry between he and Tom Savage. Matt, I've quoted you like 3 times this week saying, throwing into a crowd, that's Tom Savage. But sometimes in the middle of that crowd was Steven Anderson making the play last week. And it doesn't look like Braxton Miller is going to get out of concussion protocol. So I do think you're going to have to see Andre Ellington and Steven Anderson play some slot receiver, or otherwise, if it's Steven Anderson back at tight end, that's fine, because San Francisco has been very generous to tight ends this year. Before last week when they played Chicago, they had given up a tight end touchdown in 5 straight games, including touchdowns to 2 different Seattle tight ends. And I'm not down on Cameron Brait. Cameron Brait is my number 10 tight end this week, and I'm going to go with Cameron Brait in one of my lineups this week. And what you like about Brait is, in addition to the 2 touchdowns from Winston, where, and I don't want to say Winston forces the ball to him in the red zone, but it's who he's thinking about and looking for in the red zone, and it was successful. And look, Green Bay had only given up touchdowns, 1 touchdown to tight ends going into last week. Brait had 2. He also had 6 targets, but even more importantly, he's facing Detroit. This is Detroit that gave up 5 for 175 to Ed Dixon. Michael Huomanawanui has scored against them. Adam Shaheen scored against them. Kyle Rudolph had 2 touchdowns against them. Seth DeValve had 4 for 70 against them. Last week it was Ben Watson scoring against them. So when you're breaking ties in favor of the tight end facing Detroit. So Rudolph, I think, is number 4. Anderson's number 7. Brait's number 10. They're all tight end ones this week in my book.
Our man Wendell Rita asks, Matt, can Tyreek Hill possibly have 2 good games in a row? And where is your confidence level with the Chiefs in this big AFC West game?
I'm pretty confident about the passing game. I think they've worked things out in the passing game. They've had, they handed over some of the duties away. Andy Reid handed the duties over to an offensive coordinator or a coach to help out there. And I think that they did some nice work with misdirection, using 2 tight ends, finding ways to get Hill free by using, Kelce to threaten the seam on the same side as him. And you saw that pay dividends against the Jets defense, which isn't too bad. So, I mean, looking at Oakland, which is kind of an open door, the silver and black carpet for, in terms of the secondary is concerned, I think Hill's a guy that you want to start. And it's a guy, Hill went 6 for 125 and a touchdown in the last trip. at Oakland. They're going to be at home. I feel pretty good about this. I'm starting him. And I think that even if he delivers at worst, he gives you that, 5-6 catch day for 60, 70 yards and a couple of runs for another, 15 to 20 yards. That's still not bad. And I think, if you keep your expectations conservative to a wide receiver 3, you're probably going to be rewarded with more.
What about the ground game, Matt? Because Jesse asked if we would consider Morris over Hunt in a PPR.
I would. I know a lot of people won't, but again, this is the Marcy Rossman deal, I mean, just as explained earlier, you look at this and okay, so Hunt went 9 for 40, 323, 3 for 23 as a receiver last week against the Jets. When I watched that game, the holes just weren't there. The creases weren't there for them. The defense hasn't gotten significantly better, in terms of what they do. When they face teams that can actually, score, especially in the passing game, you can look at, the game logs that we have at Football Guys, and basically they've given up 27, 20, 20, 34, 31, 28. And this is to teams like New England, the Chargers, New England, the Eagles, Houston with Deshaun Watson, Oakland in their first matchup. Dallas put up 28, and we saw that Dallas hasn't been great, offensively and on that end of the spectrum. And then, the Giants and Buffalo, their offenses aren't all that good. So yeah, they were able to hold their teams under 20, but against the Jets and McCown and those receivers, they gave up 38 points last week. So to me, this is a pass-oriented attack, and to me, Hunt they haven't figured it out in the run game. It may work out where they can use him in a game script to seal the game after a big lead. But even when you expect teams to win, we don't expect them to blow other teams out and pad a lead and just pound the ball like that. That's a hard thing to bet on. I'd rather go with Morris against a Giants defense that they're going to pound the ball because they need to sustain offense in Dallas, and that the Giants just can't defend it.
Joe says, I wish I had Matt's address. I'd order him a pizza. How
well,
cool
I appreciate that.
To have him to have to pay the pizza guy on the podcast. That would be cool. And stay tuned. We'll get you some Mobile, Alabama. We may do a Google Hangout from Saucy Q in Mobile.
Oh, yeah.
So
double order greens, baby.
Oh, little ribs therapy. That sounds good to me, and sounds good to you as well. Getting some more questions in via the chat room. We appreciate everyone. The chat room, and too many questions, Bloom. But I did want to pick your brain about this one. As we get so many chat questions in, appreciate everyone for listening and for chiming in on the show. This one is about Gio. This is from G's13, Bloom. Anybody got thoughts on Gio versus Howard this week? Trying to fill my flex, and I keep going back and forth, assuming Mixon is out, of course.
Yeah, and I believe as of this moment, I'm going to say, by the way, for everybody with questions, I will have a thread up at the footballguys.com message board, and I will answer everything I can Sunday morning in that thread, and I'll open it up sometime early tomorrow, so it'll be pinned in the Shark Pool. As of right now, in my projections, I have Gio Bernard at 13.7 in a PPR league and Jordan Howard at 13.4. But projections, as always, that one data point is narrow and it doesn't tell the whole story. I think that Gio Bernard is the safe play. I think if you were comfortable saying in a PPR league, I want those 13 points. I want 10 points. I want 12 points. I want 9 points. Gio Bernard is more likely to get you there. We did see Cincinnati's running game the last 2 weeks finally get on track. Bernard looked fantastic. I do think there's also something to be said that Bernard's fresh. These guys have been playing for 3 months, getting beat up, and Bernard's been barely used. And he's a swift back. He's quick. He's tough-minded. We've seen him make some memorable plays. If I know he's going to get 20 times to touch the ball, I know he's going to get us 10 to 13 PPR points, and maybe as many as 20 or 22. I do like Jordan Howard this week. So the short answer, I could just say Giovanni Bernard, move on. But I do want to spend a little time on Jordan Howard because as Matt and I talked about this on the couch this week, and as I thought about it more, this does feel like a Jordan Howard afternoon. Now, perhaps, I mean, one thing I like here is I don't think Mitchell Trubisky is a mistake-prone quarterback. I don't think he's going to give Cincinnati short fields. This one will get out of hand right away. Cincinnati cannot control the clock. This is not something they've been able to do at any point this year. They've been one of the worst teams at winning the time of possession battle or dictating the game script. I don't think that's going to change. So I do believe that if you give John Fox 8 or 9 possessions, on at least 3 of them, he's going to call run to Howard, run to Howard, run to Howard. If they make a first down, run to Howard, run to Howard, run to Howard. You know, I mean, that's he's going to have the opportunity to get one of those 25 or 30 carry games. So if you're looking for that 150-yard, 2-touchdown game that can win your week for you, I think that is in the range of outcomes for Howard this week.
I use prompts. I'm not Carrot Head or Carrot Top, whatever. Carrot Head, Bucket Head, Eraser Head. How about that? There you go. But I do have a copy of John Fox's play call sheet right here.
Yeah.
Run, run, hunt. That's how he just use around. Like, you don't want to lips. Don't read my lips. We're gonna run again, guys.
We're gonna go with the run.
We're gonna run.
It's like for our older
the camera
viewers.
caught it.
Yeah. For our older viewers, that's like the match game with Whoopi with the card, you know.
We're making whoopee on this show. That sounds weird, but whatever. It's only weird if you make it weird. It is the Audible Live. Matt, any final thoughts or game update you want to get to?
Well, I'm a little bit behind as I'm just covering this for our recaps every week. So I'm probably not the best for the update, but I just think that, I liked Bloom's arguments for a lot of the players that he's talked about this week, especially, the tight end play, talking about Steven Anderson, because I've considered Braid over that, but I like the arguments that he posed. And when Bloom has a really strong feeling about something and he can pose a good argument with it, which he usually does, you want to go with it. So I think I think those are good. And, especially with his acumen for being able to bring a fantasy championship home. So I think you guys are in good hands with him this week, and we're just glad to have you back, Cecil. It's going to be a lot of fun, as we go through the playoffs here. Hopefully we all get to celebrate all our listeners, at least in one league this year. And
there we have it. Bloom, you're in a festive spirit, I see.
Yeah. This is fun. Hopefully let's keep it fun. We're all intelligent, and we can use our intelligence against ourselves and look too long and too hard for reasons that we might be wrong. The playoff weeks in my mind have always been good weeks to really set your lineup on Tuesday or Wednesday based on your instincts, the who brung you kind of stuff. And then as we get through practices by Friday or Saturday, you have a better idea of a lot of the things Dr. Gene educates us about. And again, we'll be back Sunday morning, Matt and Gene and I, to give the latest and just enjoy. And the beautiful thing is this is just the time of the season, like tonight's game. There's so much more on the line for these teams, and usually it causes players to start to transcend their previous performances. It causes teams to start to transcend the performances, and it brings out the best in a lot of what brings us to the NFL. And the fantasy retreats back into the background a little bit. I think that's a great way to approach the fantasy playoffs, because I'm with you folks. I mean, I've got 4 or 5 teams this week, 3 more teams next week that have buys, and I'm sure that when I'm doing things around the house, like the question will pop into my head, am I really going to bench Demaryius Thomas for Theo Riddick? I mean, and then I'm thinking about my projections, and I'm thinking about what my what recommendations I'm making to people, and I'm doubling back and parsing everything in a way that maybe I wasn't doing during the season. And then I catch myself and realize, this is the trap. And I hope that I can be a cautionary example to help people not fall into the trap and keep it fun and enjoy it, and enjoy football, and enjoy just, that this is something we have. And like we always like to say, Cease, fantasy football is one of the main things on your mind right now. Hopefully that means that things are going pretty smooth in your life. I'm sure as you can attest, sometimes there are things that overshadow that. So sometimes no news is good news.
And it's community. It's the community we've built. We appreciate everyone out there. 12 years on this show. So we thank you guys. By the way, Chadler says, do I get in the unique name club? Cecil and Sigmund. And I'll say what Chris Mortensen told me years ago. How many times do you hear about a show hosted by Cecil and Sigmund?
Yeah, Adam Schefter was tickled by that too.
Yeah. So there we have it. We thank you all for listening each and every week right here on the Audible. Follow Matt Waldman on Twitter at Matt Waldman. RSP time. RSP time. It's here. It's coming. Ultimate road trip. Stay up to date with everything Sigmund Bloom is doing at Sigmund Bloom, at Dr. Jene Bramel, at Jene Bramel. I'm at Cecil Lammey. The show is at the Audible, and we say thanks. Stay tuned and stay frosty.